what makes the U.S. the most powerful innovation hub? The world's leading universities, you might say. For Robert Zimmer, University of Chicago president, one of the great strengths of U.S. higher education is its ability to welcome immigrants who come to seek dreams. For example, there are over 25 immigrant students at his university who are protected under DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. But they may soon have to live in fear because President Trump administration officially announced his decision to end DACA last Tuesday, waiting for the congressional approval in the coming 6 months. That is for sure a dangerous move to Zimmer, who thinks it would damage not only U.S. higher education but also the nation's global leadership. 3 days before the announcement, Zimmer wrote a letter to Trump urging him to uphold the DACA and pushing Congress to make the right decision. DACA, which was implemented in the year 2012 by President Barack Obama's administration, has protected nearly 800,000 young undocumented immigrants from deportation. And we are joined by Robert Zimmer, the president of the University of Chicago. President Zimmer, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Are the universities, the very few oases still in the United States, looking at inclusiveness?
It's always been the case, and always will be the case, that their societies are complicated and there's not a uniformity of view about them, about what should be done in them. And people are going to have different views. And I think that universities have demonstrated their capacity over time to continue to uphold values and to themselves evolve over time so that these values become, in fact, more realized. So it doesn't mean that it's simple, and it's all the, exactly because it's not simple, is all the more important reason to be speaking about this and to be reiterating these values.
But President Zimmer, as you may know, the right wing in your country have been criticizing university like yours, elite university they call it, or the Ivy Leagues, are really not grounded enough to the realities of the American society. As the top educator, I guess, of a university, what do you make all of this? And they're shouting about this on the networks and in the media, on the internet, in Facebook. What are you going to do?
Well, we've been very clear about what we're going to do, which is that we are very focused on delivering the nature of an education in which people learn to think. It's not a political education. It's an education that is focused on giving people the capacity to learn to analyze, to question, to challenge. And we feel that this is the highest value that we can add to society, which is producing students, educating students in a way that they are strong enough, smart enough, and have the habits of mind to be constantly thinking, analyzing, synthesizing, and integrating, and be able to evaluate and live in a world of multiple views and multiple issues.
Sounds beautiful, but how would you make them strong enough? I think that is probably the hardest question.
This is the nature of our education is geared to this, and it's the everybody who has spent time at the University of Chicago, whether as a faculty member, as a visitor, as a student, recognizes that this is a very particular environment. It's an environment in which everybody challenges each other, in which one is free to hold any views and to have to argue about them, and that this is the environment. This is what we spend 4 years teaching our students, and we think students everywhere should learn to hear the views of people who are very, have views that are very different from their own. They both can understand more about their own views, they can have their own views evolve, they can learn to challenge the views of others and to challenge their own views. And this is not, it's not a simple or easy process.
From its founding in the year 1890, the University of Chicago has been committed to open, rigorous, and also intense inquiry. The academic culture has contributed to producing the fourth most Nobel Prize laureates among all universities. 3 of the 4 Nobel Awards that the University of Chicago has won this century have been in the field of economic sciences. Its academic freedom, drive for creativity, world-class research infrastructures are expected to attract and nurture the kind of scholars that will go on to win Nobel Prizes. President Zimmer, one of the things about the University of Chicago is people are extremely surprised. How could one university in the world be able to churn out all of these Nobel laureates, particularly in the sciences field? How did that work? Many would ask for those secrets. Would you like to share some of those remedies?
Share the secrets. It's very much a piece of the culture of challenge that I've been talking about. So people come to the University of Chicago because they understand that it's going to be an outstanding place for them to be sharpening their ideas, to have their ideas be challenged, and a place where there's an enormous amount of acceptance of thinking in very different ways. So it's exactly this openness to ideas, this acceptance of very different ways of thinking, this constant environment of challenge that both helps scientists, economists, and others develop and sharpen their ideas, but it's also the environment that attracts people who are very imaginative and want to be in that environment of challenge. So it both attracts and then fosters this special type of work.
Very fascinating. You've been seeing, Professor Zimmer, that in your university, MIT as well, technologies, particularly about the sciences, are very much being developed. However, on the West Coast, you see a lot of entrepreneurship, for example, with Stanford University, some of the others. How do you see these advantages of different universities? Do you think you're getting ever closer when it comes to advantages, or actually very different, even more probably, in the future? President Zimmer.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yes, that's a very interesting question. And what I would say is that universities in the United States do have rather different feelings about them, rather different strengths, rather different approaches. And I think part of the strength of the higher education system in the United States is, in fact, that not every institution is the same, and that there are different comparative advantages that different institutions have. Now, that said, obviously, all institutions need to evolve, and I think one thing you are seeing is that there's an increased emphasis on questions around innovation in many universities in the country. But that doesn't mean that everybody is approaching innovation in exactly the same way, because the nature of the work that faculty do, the nature of the interests of students are going to vary from one university to another. And so the particular way that innovation is getting realized will also vary. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see certain general patterns that are somewhat similar across universities, but then universities, by virtue of their different advantages and different emphases, will be realizing those in different ways. So it's a mixture of kind of co-evolution and maintaining of differences.
As yourself, President Zimmer, you're a mathematician yourself, well, at the same time, the president of University of Chicago, which churning out most of the Nobel laureates. What do you think will be the most important element from your perspective only, for innovation? Because that is really the word every country is talking about, whether United States or China.
Well, I think there are a few aspects to this. One is an environment in which students are encouraged to think that way, in which they are encouraged to think about what it is that's new, how you can do things differently, what types of opportunities are there for taking the types of things that they've learned and been studying and thinking about them with respect to products or processes for benefiting society. The other aspect of this that I would say is important is the nature of the scientific work that is going on, so that as one sees particular efforts in particular areas, new types of smart materials, the whole development of quantum computing and quantum information, that this is going to produce a set of opportunities that students are going to be attracted to, and of course faculty as well. So I think it's both a question of developing new science and new types of processes on one hand, and on the other hand, giving students and faculty the opportunity to be thinking about how to bring some of these into active use in society.
I see. I was reading latest news, of course, quite an interesting piece, President Zimmer, that is, they say University of Chicago, the students there, are the most caffeinated among all universities inside the United States. Is that part of the success story of University of Chicago? President Zimmer.
Maybe it is.
Oh.
And I try to provide leadership in that direction by drinking an enormous amount of coffee myself.
Well, really appreciate President Robert Zimmer from University of Chicago. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your time with us.